The air in the high conclave of the Zalosian ascendancy was as still and cold as the void between stars. It was a chamber carved from the heart of a captive asteroid, its walls of polished obsidian reflecting the swirling nebulae projected onto the domed ceiling. Here, in the sanctum of absolute authority, the silence was a physical weight, a presence as real as the Grand Luminary himself. Grand Luminary Kalen stood upon the central dais, his elongated form draped in robes of woven light, his multifaceted eyes gazing not at the assembled ministers, but at the single, colossal hologram that dominated the chamber's core. It was a vessel, an artifact of impossible origin, hanging in the simulated blackness like a shard of forgotten history. Its design was an offense to the elegant, flowing aesthetics of the ascendancy. It was brutalist, a thing of sharp angles, layered plating, and a color that seemed to absorb light without reflection, a flat, profound nothingness. It was a relic, a ghost that had drifted into their sovereign space, a silent, uninvited guest at the edge of their most vital trade route. "It does not respond," High Strategist Vorlag's voice echoed, sharp and precise, cutting through the oppressive quiet. He stood at the fore of the military delegation, his own uniform a stark contrast to Kalen's ceremonial attire, all rigid lines and gleaming alloys. All frequencies, all quantum entanglement pairings, all methods of communication known to the galactic community have been attempted. We have bathed it in signals from the most primitive radio waves to the most sophisticated psionic resonance queries. The response is an absolute, unyielding silence. It is not a derelict. Our deep-range gravimetric sensors confirm a functioning, albeit bizarre, power source. It maintains its position with microcorrections that defy our understanding of inertial dampening. It is occupied. It is waiting. Kalen slowly circled the hologram, his gaze tracing the primitive, ugly lines of the ship. It lacked the graceful nacelles of Zalosian null-space drives, the crystalline energy conduits, the organic, streamlined hulls that were the hallmarks of modern engineering. This thing was a block of metal, seemingly welded together with more fury than finesse. And yet, it held the attention of the entire ascendancy. It had paralyzed their expansion, frozen their fleets, and brought the heart of their empire to a standstill. The name they had found etched into its hull in a crude, angular script, cross-referenced through 1,000 cycles of linguistic archaeology, was human. A species long thought to be a minor power, confined to a small spiral arm, a footnote in the Grand Galactic Codex. A species that had, according to their most reliable intelligence, never achieved true interstellar unity, let alone the kind of power that could threaten a civilization like theirs. "Its materials are unreadable," Kalen stated, his voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in the very stone of the chamber. "Our finest analytical spectrographs return nothing but noise." The ship's energy signature is a paradox. It radiates less energy than the vacuum around it. It is a cold spot in the universe, a void in the quantum foam. How can a powered vessel be a drain on ambient reality? He turned his gaze to Vorlag, a silent question passing between them. "A stealth mechanism, Grand Luminary," Vorlag countered, his posture unbending. "A primitive but perhaps effective one. They seek to intimidate through mystery. They posture in our space, a lone, archaic warship, expecting us to be paralyzed by indecision. It is a tactic of a lesser power attempting to punch above its weight. They are testing our resolve. It is an insult, a challenge." His mandibles clicked with certainty. "The fleet is ready. A single squadron of our new Phalanx-class destroyers could disassemble that relic atom by atom before its crew could even register the attack." A murmur of assent rippled through the assembled ministers of the conclave. Vorlag's logic was sound, based on every known principle of interstellar politics and warfare. A show of force was the only language an upstart species would understand, but Kalen was not convinced. The dread he felt was not logical. It was an ancient, primal instinct, a feeling that went deeper than strategic calculus. He looked at the ship again, the hologram rotating slowly. It was not posturing, it was not threatening, it was simply present. Its stillness was not the stillness of a predator waiting to strike, but the stillness of a mountain, indifferent to the wind and the rain, existing on a timescale so vast that their entire civilization was but a fleeting moment. "You see a relic, Vorlag," Kalen said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the chamber. "I see an enigma. The humans are catalogued as a chaotic, fractured species. They wage war on themselves with more fervor than they have ever shown the galaxy. There. Technology is a patchwork of brilliance and barbarism. They have never projected power beyond their local cluster. So what is this ship? Where did it come from? Is it truly human, or is it something else wearing their forgotten name as a disguise? Does it matter?" Vorlag's retort was swift. Whatever it is it trespassed, it ignores our authority. The Ascendancy's dominance is maintained through the certainty of our response. Hesitation is perceived as weakness. This human ghost, is a test. If we fail to act, others will see. The Cathar will grow bold. The Cygnian collective will begin to question our treaties. We must make an example of this ship. Its destruction will be a message to the entire galaxy. The space of the Zalosian Ascendancy is inviolable. Kalen did not reply immediately. He extended a long, slender finger and magnified the hologram, focusing on a section of the hull. The plating was scarred, pitted not with the clean, precise scoring of energy weapons, but with impacts of a nature he could not comprehend. They were not craters, they were more like erosions, as if the very fabric of spacetime had been worn thin against the ship's skin. He felt a chill, a deep and profound cold that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. He had spent his life studying the great histories, the rise and fall of empires, the cosmic cycles of power. He knew that the greatest threats were never the ones that announced themselves with fire and fury. They were the ones that arrived in silence, the ones that broke the established rules of existence, the ones that made you question the very foundations of your knowledge. We know nothing of its capabilities, Kalen finally spoke, his voice firm, overriding the rising tide of militaristic fervor. To attack it is to strike a blind blow in the dark. We do not know if we are striking a rock or the fist of a god. You speak of messages, Vorlag. The destruction of an unknown vessel sends one message, yes, but our own destruction would send a far more permanent one. He let that thought settle in the vast chamber, the silence returning, heavier than before. We will not attack, not yet. We will dispatch the Grand Armada, not to destroy but to contain, to observe. We will surround it, we will study it, and we will wait for it to reveal its nature. We will show strength, but we will temper it with the wisdom that has allowed our ascendancy to endure for 100,000 cycles. We will not be ruled by fear, nor by pride. He looked directly at Vorlag, his multifaceted eyes unblinking. We will be ruled by reason. The Grand Armada of the Zalosian Ascendancy was a sight that had humbled empires and brought star systems to their knees. It was not a mere collection of ships. It was a flowing, geometric sculpture of power, a city of metallic titans that moved with the synchronized grace of a celestial dance. Hulls of iridescent alloy, kilometers in length, glided through the void, their null-space drives leaving faint, shimmering distortions in their wake. A wall of plasma casements, quantum missile tubes, and gravity projectors bristled from their surfaces, a silent testament to the technological supremacy of the Ascendancy. At the heart of this magnificent formation was the unassailable Truth Asterisk, Grand Luminary Kalen's flagship, a vessel that was as much a palace and a laboratory as it was a warship. From the observation dome of his flagship, Kalen watched as his fleet arrayed itself around the human ship. The scale was absurd. The lone, dark vessel was a single speck of dust, surrounded by a mountain range of gleaming, lethal power. The Zalosian fleet formed a perfect sphere of containment, their weapons ports glowing with latent energy, their shield emitters humming with readiness. It was the ultimate expression of control, a cage of unimaginable strength, and the human ship did nothing. It floated in the exact center of their formation, motionless, silent, seemingly oblivious. All vessels are in position, Grand Luminary, the ship's acting captain reported, her voice a calm, professional monotone. The containment field is stable. We have it locked in a multi-layered stasis web. It cannot move, it cannot generate a jump field, and its energy output remains negligible. Kalen stared at the viewscreen, which now showed a magnified image of the human ship. It was even uglier up close. The hull was a mosaic of mismatched plates, some darker than others, some bearing those strange, eroded scars. There were no visible viewports, no hangar bays, no sensor arrays he could recognize. It was a sealed tomb, a relic of an age best forgotten. And yet the feeling of unease that had settled in his core back in the High Conclave had not dissipated. It had grown, solidified into a cold, hard certainty. They were missing something fundamental. High Strategist Vorlag signals his readiness, the captain continued. He recommends we begin active scan. A focused energy probe to penetrate the hull and ascertain its internal configuration. Active scanning is a prelude to an attack, Kalen murmured, more to himself than to the captain. It was a standard military procedure, but it was also a provocation. What do the analysts say? The cultural specialists? What is their assessment of the human psyche? An aide stepped forward, his form shimmering as he accessed his data slate. Grand Luminary, the consensus remains unchanged. Humans are an emotionally volatile species, prone to acts of aggression born from fear and pride. They value concepts like honor and defiance over logical self-preservation. Historical analysis suggests that when cornered, they are most dangerous. However, their technological level is several orders of magnitude below our own. Any aggression on their part would be futile, a gesture of defiance, nothing more. Kalen considered this. A gesture of defiance. That felt right. Perhaps Vorlag was correct. This entire affair was a posture, a foolish, desperate gamble by a species that did not understand its own insignificance. To sit there, surrounded by a fleet that could crack planets, was either the height of arrogance or the depths of madness. Authorize High Strategist Vorlag to proceed with the active scan, Kalen commanded, his voice betraying none of his internal conflict. But on my mark, and instruct all ships to maintain maximum shield integrity. I want every sensor, every listening post, every analytical engine we have focused on that vessel. I want to know if it so much as shifts a single molecule in response. The order was relayed. Across the vast sphere of warships, energy conduits began to glow with a fierce white light. Projectors, normally used to focus planet-shattering beams of energy, were calibrated to a fine point, ready to lance out and peel back the secrets of the silent ship. Kalen felt the deck of the unassailable truth vibrate slightly as the flagship's own main reactor spooled up to full power. The air in the observation dome grew thick with anticipation. The moment of truth was at hand. They would finally force the ghost to speak. And then something happened, not from the human ship, but from within their own fleet. A message. Not a transmission sent over their comms, but a piece of data that simply appeared. It was in the central command network, fully formed, perfectly decrypted, and sitting in the priority queue as if it had been there all along. It was flagged with the highest level of diplomatic protocol, a code so ancient and formal that it was reserved for first contact with a species of proven sentience and power. The aide beside Kalen gasped, his composure breaking for a fraction of a second. Grand Luminary, we are receiving a communication from the human vessel. Kalen's eyes widened. How? We have them in a complete communications blackout. The stasis web should prevent any form of transmission. It did not originate as a transmission, Luminary, the aide stammered, his fingers flying across his data slate. It seems to have been placed directly into our systems. The source code is it's not written in any language we know. It functions on a level of quantum computing that we have only theorized. It didn't break our encryption, it simply defined itself as being on the other side of it. A cold wave washed over Kalen. This was impossible. This was a violation of the fundamental laws of information theory. Before he could process the implications, the message began to play on the main view screen. The image was not of a warrior or a politician. It was a single, unassuming human male seated in a plain, Spartan room. He was of middle age, his hair graying at the temples, his face etched with lines that spoke not of hardship, but of immense, weary patience. He wore a simple, dark tunic devoid of rank or insignia. His expression was calm, serene, almost tranquil. It was the calm of a deep ocean, hiding unfathomable pressure beneath its placid surface. This is Ambassador Thorne of the human vessel Vigilance *, the man said, his voice smooth. The Zalosian language pronounced with an eerie, flawless perfection that no translation matrix could achieve. We extend greetings to the commanders of the Zalosian fleet. We have observed your arrival and your impressive military formation. We mean you no harm. We are here on a mission of peace and observation. We would be grateful if you would power down your weapon systems. They are causing some minor interference with our long-range sensors. The audacity of the statement was breathtaking. It was delivered not as a demand, but as a polite, reasonable request, as if he were asking them to dim the lights. In the observation dome, a stunned silence reigned. Vorlag's furious voice erupted over the command channel, a torrent of disbelief and rage. A trick, a pathetic psychological ploy, they mock us. Grand Luminary, this changes nothing. Thigh. S is a confession of weakness, an attempt to forestall the inevitable. Order the scan, order the attack. But Kalen's attention was fixed on the human's eyes. They were a simple, flat brown, yet they seemed to hold a depth, a history that made him feel like a child. There was no fear in them, no arrogance, only a profound, unshakable certainty. He was looking at a creature that had seen the universe in a way that Kalen and his entire species could not begin to comprehend. Power down the active scan, Kalen ordered, his voice cutting through Vorlag's tirade. Hold your positions. He then opened a direct channel to the human vessel, his own image appearing before the ambassador. I am Grand Luminary Kalen of the Zalosian Ascendancy, he said, his voice resonating with the full authority of his office. You have entered our sovereign territory without permission. You have ignored our hails. You have positioned yourself in a manner that can only be interpreted as a strategic threat. Explain your presence. Ambassador Thorne inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect. Grand Luminary Kalen, it is an honor. Our apologies for the lack of communication. Our systems are unique. They are not designed for conventional broadcast. As for our position, I assure you it was chosen with great care, not as a threat, but for a very specific purpose related to the stability of this region of spacetime. We are here to observe a phenomenon. Our mission is academic. We have no interest in your territory, your resources, or your politics. Vorlag's voice crackled over the private channel to Kalen. Lies, spacetime stability, academic mission, these are the excuses of a spy. He is stalling Luminary. Do not let this primitive, outmaneuver you with words. Kalen ignored him. A phenomenon, he repeated, intrigued despite his suspicion. What kind of phenomenon requires a vessel of your particular design? Thorn's expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been sadness crossing his features. It is a matter of considerable complexity. It is not a subject best discussed under the threat of armed conflict. We ask again as a gesture of good faith that you lower your weapons. It would facilitate a more productive dialogue. This was the crux, the moment of decision. To back down now in the face of this calm, almost paternal request would be a loss of face for the entire ascendancy. Vorlag was right about that. But to press forward, to attack a vessel that could insert flawless data into the heart of their most secure networks, felt like suicide. Kalen was caught between the demands of his empire's pride and the chilling whisper of his own intuition. Your request is denied. Vorlag's voice suddenly boomed across the open channel, a flagrant breach of protocol. He had bypassed the Grand Luminary's authority. We will have our answers. You will submit to a scan, or you will be fired upon. This is your final warning. On the view screen, Kalen saw the High Strategist's flagship, the Iron Resolve *, begin to glow as its main weapon charged, a brilliant spear of energy forming at its prow. Ambassador Thorn's gaze shifted slightly, as if looking past Kalen to the source of the new voice. His calm demeanor did not falter. He simply sighed, a small, almost imperceptible exhalation of breath. It was a sigh of profound disappointment, the sigh of a teacher whose student stubbornly refuses to learn. So be it, Thorn said, his voice losing none of its tranquility. We had hoped to avoid this. Please understand that what happens next is not an act of aggression on our part. It is merely a corrective measure. Before Kalen could react, before he could countermand Vorlag's insane escalation, the High Strategist gave the order. Fire. From the prow of the Iron Resolve *, a beam of pure, coherent energy, a lance of harnessed stellar fire capable of piercing the core of a moon, erupted across the void. It moved at the speed of light, a silent, incandescent line drawn between the Zalosian warship and the ancient human vessel. It was a perfect shot, aimed to disable, not destroy, to carve through the ship's engine section and force its surrender. The assembled crews on 1,000 bridges held their collective breath, anticipating the flash of impact, the bloom of vaporized metal, the scream of a dying ship. But there was no impact, there was no flash, there was no scream. As the beam of energy approached the Vigilance *, the space around the human ship seemed to thicken. It did not shimmer with the light of a shield. It did not warp or distort. It simply became more real. The lance of pure power and unstoppable force of physics struck this field of absolute reality and ceased to be. It did not explode. It did not deflect. It simply vanished. One moment it was a terrifying spear of annihilation. The next it was gone, absorbed into nothingness as if it had never been fired. The energy, the mass, the Here physical consequence of the weapon, all of it was just erased from existence. A silence deeper and more absolute than any Kalen had ever known fell upon the observation dome of the unassailable truth *. The hum of the ship's systems, the quiet chatter of the crew, his own breathing, it all seemed to vanish, consumed by the sheer conceptual horror of what they had just witnessed. They had not fired upon a ship. They had fired upon a law of nature, and the law had not even deigned to notice. On the view screen, Ambassador Thorn's image remained. He had not moved. His expression had not changed. He simply waited, allowing the impossibility of the moment to settle. As I said, Thorn continued, his voice as calm as ever, interference. Your weapons operate on principles that are momentarily inconsistent with the localized reality we are currently maintaining. I would advise against any further attempts. The effect is cumulative. Vorlag, for the first time in his life, was speechless. His flagship, the pride of the Ascendancy, had fired its ultimate weapon, and the result was less than nothing. It was a non-event. It was a rounding error in the universe's calculations. Kalen felt the foundations of his world, of his understanding of power and technology, crumble into dust. His people had spent millennia mastering the laws of physics, bending energy and matter to their will. They had built an empire on the predictable, rational nature of the cosmos. And this single, silent human ship had just shown them that their laws were merely suggestions, and that it could and would say no. Kalen finally found his voice, a faint, strained whisper. What are you?" Ambassador Thorne offered a small, sad smile. "We are human. We are a people who learned a very long time ago that the most dangerous weapon in the universe is not a beam of energy or a missile. It is a question. The question is, what is real? And we are the people who were forced to find an answer." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing through the screen, looking directly into Kalen's soul. "Grand Luminary, I believe our dialogue can now proceed on a more enlightened basis. My ship is open to you. Come aboard. Alone. Let us speak not as potential adversaries, but as fellow inhabitants of a universe far stranger and more perilous than your philosophy has ever dreamed." The shuttle that carried Grand Luminary Kalen across the void was a small, diplomatic vessel, its polished hull a stark contrast to the scarred, ancient plating of the human ship it approached. As they drew closer, Kalen saw that the hull of the Vigilance was not metal, not in any sense he understood. It seemed to be a crystallized concept, a solid form of something that was not matter. The scars on its surface were not from weapons, but from contact with impossibilities. It was the ship of a people who had sailed the seas of chaos and returned. The shuttle was guided into a small, unassuming airlock that opened with a silent, seamless motion. There was no docking tube, no magnetic clamp. The airlock simply extended a field that enclosed his shuttle, phased it through the hull, and deposited it gently in a hangar bay. The bay was vast, empty, and silent. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and something else, something old, like stone and dust. There were no crew members, no maintenance drones, no signs of life. The only being present was Ambassador Thorne, standing alone in the center of the cavernous space, waiting for him. "Welcome aboard the Vigilance * Grand Luminary," Thorne said, his voice echoing slightly in the immense chamber. He gestured for Kalen to follow him. "I must apologize for the lack of a formal reception. Most of our crew are indisposed. Their duties are of a meditative nature." They walked through long, silent corridors. The ship's interior was as Spartan and severe as its exterior. The walls were the same dark, non-reflective material. There were no decorations, no unnecessary lights, only a soft, ambient glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It did not feel like a starship. It felt like a temple, a monastery dedicated to some austere, forgotten god. "This vessel." "It is not a warship," Kalen stated, the words coming out as a realization rather than a question. "It is and it is not," Thorne replied, not turning around. "It was built for a war, yes, but the enemy we fought was not a civilization. It was not an empire of flesh and blood. We fought against a contagion of thought, a weaponized paradox. An enemy that did not destroy ships with plasma, but with logic bombs that could convince a ship's reactor that it did not exist." He paused, stopping before a large, unadorned doorway. "Imagine, Grand Luminary, an enemy that could broadcast a mathematical proof that demonstrates the non-existence of gravity. Not a field that negates it, but a truth so fundamental, so undeniable, that gravity simply ceases to be a functional force in that region of space. That was our war, a war for the soul of reality itself." Kalen felt a vertigo of the mind, a dizzying sense of scale that dwarfed all his previous conceptions of conflict. "You fought against the laws of physics?" "We fought to protect them," Thorne corrected gently. He opened the door, revealing a room that was the ship's heart. It was not a bridge or an engine room. It was a vast, spherical chamber. In the center, suspended in a web of faint, golden light, was not a machine, but a person. A human seated in a posture of deep meditation, their body ancient and frail, yet radiating an aura of immense, quiet power. Countless others like them were visible in alcoves lining the chamber's walls, all in the same state of profound concentration. "This is the engine of the Vigilance *, Thorne explained, his voice hushed with reverence. "We call it the ontological anchor. These are the sentinels. They are not pilots or engineers. They are philosophers, mathematicians, logicians of the highest order. They do not fly the ship, they agree upon its existence. They constantly observe and reaffirm the fundamental constants of the universe within a localized field. Planck's constant, the speed of light, the charge of an electron. They hold these truths to be self-evident, and their collective, disciplined consciousness makes it so. Our ship does not have shields, Grand Luminary. It has consensus. A very, very stubborn consensus." Kalen stared at the central sentinel. He finally understood. The Zalosian weapon had not been destroyed or blocked. It had entered a space where the physical laws required for its function were being enforced with absolute, unyielding rigor. The beam's mechanism relied on a subtle quantum fluctuation, a loophole in the fabric of reality that their science had learned to exploit. But in the reality defined by the Vigilance *, that loophole did not exist. The weapons simply failed to work like a match struck in a vacuum. The human victory was not one of superior force, but of superior definition. They had not defeated the Zalosian fleet, they had edited it out of the equation. "The war, did you win?" Kalen asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We achieved a stalemate," Thorn said, a deep sadness in his tone. "The enemy, which we called the Formless, could not unmake our reality while we held it in place. And we could not fully erase their corrosive influence. They retreated to the places between galaxies, to the dark voids where the universe is thin and new ideas can take root. We built the Sentinels, ships like the Vigilance Asterisk, to stand guard, to reinforce the fabric of existence where it grows weak. They are lighthouses, grand luminary in a sea of encroaching nothingness." They left the chamber and proceeded to a small, simple room with a table and 2 chairs. A large, dark screen dominated one wall. Thorn gestured for Kalen to sit. "We have been watching this sector of the galaxy for a very long time," Thorn said, his tone shifting from philosophical to serious. "We have been silent observers, respecting the sovereignty of the species that have evolved here. Your ascendancy is a marvel of order and logic. We admire your achievements, but we are here now because our mission has become critical." He activated the screen. It did not show a star chart. It was a map of something else, a representation of the galactic structure on a level Kalen had never seen. It showed the flow of causality, the integrity of physical law represented as a shimmering, complex web of light. But at the edge of the map, a creeping darkness was spreading. It was not an invading fleet. It was a rot, a place where the web of light was fraying, growing dim, and in some places snapping altogether. It was a region of cosmic silence, of existential decay. "We call it the Great Silence," Thorn said, his voice grim. "It is an area where the universe is beginning to forget itself, where the constants are drifting, where causality is becoming unreliable. We have seen it before. It is a sign, a precursor. The Formless are returning, or rather they are finding a new foothold." Kalen looked closer at the map. His multifaceted eyes widened in horror as he recognized the star patterns, the galactic landmarks. The encroaching darkness, the existential void, was spreading from a region of space just beyond the Zalosian ascendancy's borders. His empire, his people, his entire civilization were living on the shores of an ocean of unreality. Their magnificent fleets, their powerful weapons, their entire understanding of the universe, it was all a sandcastle built at the edge of an incoming tide of absolute negation. "Why are you showing me this?" Kalen asked, his voice hollow. The conflict between their fleets, the pride, the politics, it all seemed like the squabbling of insects in the shadow of a mountain. "Because you are in their path," Thorn stated simply, "and because we cannot top it alone. The Asterisk Vigilance is old, grand luminary, one of the last of its kind. Our people have changed. After the war, we turned inward. We became a species of gardeners, tending to our own small patch of reality, hoping the wider universe would heal itself. We lost the will to build these ships, to train these sentinels. It was a duty too heavy to bear, but the threat has not passed, and now it is at your doorstep." Thorn looked at him, the full weight of his ancient, weary race in his eyes. "Your fleet fired upon us with the intent to harm. By the old laws of my people, we would be justified in dismantling your ships, your empire, your entire civilization, simply to remove a potential complication from our path. But that is not who we are. Not anymore. We are not conquerors. We are guardians, and we are tired." He leaned back in his chair. "The Zalosian ascendancy is a civilization built on logic and order. Your minds are disciplined. Your society is stable. You have the intellectual and spiritual fortitude to understand the nature of the true enemy. You have the potential to learn what we have learned without suffering as we did. We did not come here to fight you, grand luminary. We came here to recruit you." The revelation struck Kalen with the force of a physical blow. The ancient human warship had not come to challenge his modern fleet. It had come to offer them a war worth fighting. It had humbled them not out of malice but out of necessity, to shatter their pride and force them to see the real shape of the universe. The humans were not a threat to be vanquished. They were a possibility, a dark, terrifying, and yet profoundly hopeful one. They were offering a partnership in a battle for existence itself. Kalen sat in silence for a long time, the map of the encroaching silence burning itself into his mind. He thought of his people, of their pride, their certainty, their elegant, ordered world. He saw it all poised on the brink of an abyss they had not even known existed. The humans had not won a battle. They had won the future, and they were offering to share it. He rose from his chair, his tall form casting a long shadow in the soft light of the human ship. He looked at Thorn, this quiet ambassador from a civilization that had stared into the void and had not flinched. He felt the fear, the awe, the crushing weight of responsibility settle upon him. His empire's destiny had just been irrevocably changed. "Ambassador," Kalen said, his voice no longer the resonant boom of a grand luminary, but the quiet, humbled tone of a student before his master. Tell me, where do we begin?